years ago, houses belonging to a lost neighborhood were erased from the landscape. Today, their foundations lie beneath empty lots on Waterbury's Jackson Street.
We're at the site of what has historically been known as the Dog's Nest neighborhood of Waterbury. The term is sort of derogatory. It conjures up images of animals. It was an Irish and Italian immigrant neighborhood. The fights would break out, and newspaper articles refer to stilettos being flashed.
Archaeologists rediscovered it in 2015, offering a glimpse into the city's past when Irish and Italian immigrants built their lives here.
The site was an overgrown empty lot. It had been used as a school bus storage facility.
Two construction projects converged on Jackson Street. The city of Waterbury had planned to reconstruct the street as part of its Waterbury Active Transportation and Economic Resurgence Project. Concurrently, the Connecticut Department of Transportation was working on a bypass roadway for the Route 8 I-84 interchange. As part of both projects' environmental review, the law required an archaeological investigation to prevent any undue harm to important forgotten or buried sites. But archaeologists don't start with digging. They begin with paper records, maps, deeds, censuses, and city directories. Who lived here? What were their lives like? By the 1850s, the earliest houses were built, and the neighborhood began to show up on maps in 1868. The location was undesirable, hemmed in by noxious gasworks, factories, the railroad, and the then polluted Naugatuck River. A building lot could be bought cheaply here, but the two-story houses, though small, were well-built, wood-framed, with stonework foundations and basements. The foundations themselves only tell a small part of the story about the lives lived inside these homes.
We do see differences in the construction of the foundations. We have nicely cut stone on some of the buildings, and on other buildings we have cobblestones which were partially shaped to give flat edges, but mostly cobblestone construction and large boulder construction.
By 1900, there were 22 houses, and 363 people lived here.
From census information, we know that there was at least 25 people living in the house behind me.
On each lot, the house closest to Jackson Street was the first one built, and later, owners built rental houses behind to generate income. Most of the neighborhood had 2 or 3 houses on each lot by the end of the 19th century. It was families like the Kellys, McNamara's, Daly's, and Collinses, all Irish immigrants who built the first homes in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. They helped fill the huge demand for laborers at Waterbury's famous clock, brass, and metalware factories, and for the railroad and nearby gasworks. Some of the homeowners in the neighborhood took in newly arrived immigrant men as boarders to help make ends meet. At first, they were Irish immigrants like the owners, but that began to change as large numbers of Italians began arriving in Waterbury. By the end of the century, the Dog's Nest was a mostly Italian enclave, and these new Italian Americans faced severe prejudice with the added hurdle of a language barrier.
It was the same newspaper treatment of immigrants that the Italians were being subject to, that the Irish probably also were subject to earlier on in the 19th century.
The history of 23 Jackson Street reflects the neighborhood as a whole. By 1900, the owners, John and Margaret Kelly, had built second and third houses on their property and had moved into the new 2-family in the middle, along with their son-in-law and his young children. 6 families called 23 Jackson Street home. The Kellys, the Gumis from France, and the rest from Italy. The Colasantis, Aldericis, Delorios, and the Duomos. There were also 11 single Italian men who boarded with their compatriots at this address. Most of the men worked in the brass factories, but some plied other trades. Like the men in these photos, Mr. Colasanti repaired bicycles, Mr. Alderici was a stonecutter, and the Delorios were shoemakers. There were also entrepreneurs in the neighborhood. Michael Collins built his small bottling factory at the back of 32 Jackson Street. But despite their family's efforts to settle here, gradually the railroad and nearby gasworks expanded and bought up the land.
Most of the buildings were torn down by about 1910, 1915. It was always an industrial area. And as those industries expanded, it put more and more pressure on this marginal neighborhood.
Guided by maps, archaeologists dug trenches along Jackson Street to reveal the first foundations. And soon, many more foundations would be unearthed on the west side of the street.
Excavation started with a backhoe, removing layers of fill that had been brought in over time. In terms of excavation with large machinery, you have to remove large amounts of soil really quickly. You're digging down like maybe a couple feet at a time.
Careful hand excavation then revealed details about the houses, especially the surviving basements. Even though these homes were filled to the brim with occupants, only 32 Jackson Street had a finished interior basement wall.
But we didn't see anything like a brick floor or a wood floor, which would indicate that the basements were being occupied. We were hoping to find backyard privies, cisterns, wells that had been used for household trash disposal. These type of deposits would contain bottles, ceramics, faunal material, which would give us information about the occupants. These would be tightly dated deposits. The features would be filled up over a period of 10 to 15 years.
While a disappointment for the archaeologists, the failure to find privy pits is interesting in itself.
Most of the houses along Jackson Street had running water by 1870, and we feel they also had indoor plumbing and maybe water closets. And the sewage from those indoor facilities, we think, was being directed to the Naugatuck River.
A glimpse at cooperation between longtime neighbors came in the discovery of one stone dry well that appears to have been shared by the Mulcahy's and the McAuliffes. A few household items were found, tantalizing clues to the material culture of the families who lived here. Buttons, a marble, parts of smoking pipes and clocks, dishes, a holy water font, and a silver-plated spoon came from the Collins house at 32 Jackson Street. Some items were made in the very factories where many neighborhood men worked. The consumer goods of working-class Waterbury reflected a sweeping change in American culture that followed on the heels of the Industrial Revolution, when inexpensive products became accessible to all. These artifacts and the stone foundations found at the Dog's Nest site help reveal a long-lost piece of Waterbury's story, one that reflects the larger ongoing immigrant experience in America. The men and women who came to this small neighborhood created new lives here, working in the city's famous factories, helping each other at home, socializing at local clubs, and attending church. They experienced bigotry and discrimination, crowded living conditions, and harsh working environments. But they eventually became citizens and raised their children as proud Americans who also celebrated their ethnic roots. During their time in the Dog's Nest, their labor helped create Waterbury's great industrial wealth. But their lifeways also contributed to creating an America that has always been enriched by cultures from across the globe.